Welcome, everybody, to the Write Hive conference. My name is Hien Wen, and I am your moderator for this session. I am thrilled to be in conversation with one of our guests of honor, the amazing DeAndra Davis. I'll start with your official bio, but would love to let you also briefly introduce yourself to the audience. DeAndra Davis is an award-winning neurodivergent Jamaican-American author who lives somewhere in the mountains. Her critically acclaimed books include All the Noise at Once and The Lovers, the Liars, and Me. When she isn't 100%ing video games and reading worlds more interesting than the one she lives in, she's being distracted by her too many kids, dogs, and songs from Wicked on her phone. Her claim to fame is that her Florida Man birthday headline features an alligator and a drive-thru, and that is very on brand for her. DeAndra can be found on most socials at DeAndra Writes. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I feel like whenever people tell me to introduce myself, I'm like, I know nothing about myself, so I think my bio will be it. I don't know a single thing. I don't even know who I am.
That's fair. That's why I offered to read it. I'm like, it's a little bit high pressure to have to introduce yourself, but
I'm so bad at it. Every single time someone's like, tell us something about yourself, everything that I've ever known about myself just leaks out of my ears.
very valid. So I'm really excited to dive into your books today, and we can kick it off. You've spoken a bit publicly about your son being the inspiration behind your debut novel. Could you
Mhm.
speak a bit more on your writing inspirations and how those may have evolved over time for you?
Yeah, and so I think my son was the start of it for sure, but I think I've also spoken about how another thing was just there were just like two incidents with people that were either explicitly autistic or autistic coded who had interactions with the police that um were I don't want to say interesting because it wasn't interesting in a good way, right? But that definitely made me think about the way that autistic people are dealt with by officers, and so that definitely influenced the way that I wrote my debut, and it definitely influenced the way that I thought about things. I know especially one incident in Miami where an autistic man had gotten out from like a group home, and his caretaker was out and was just trying to get him back inside, and the police had surrounded them, like they were in the street, and the police had surrounded them, and he asked them like, "Hey, don't shoot. He's unarmed. He's just autistic. I'm just trying to get him back." And they shot anyway. They shot the caretaker, but they shot anyway. Thankfully, like no one died or anything, but it's terrifying to think that just because someone is acting differently than what someone might expect, and even when they have the help and even when they have the explanation, that people would rush to react in that way. And that was definitely something that I thought about. And I think when it came to my son, I thought about the ways in which those things intersect with the idea that, especially like as a Black male, he's more likely to just have the police called on him in general, right? Um, or even the fact that, Black children are more likely to be perceived as older than they are when they're younger, more likely to be perceived as aggressive even when they're not being aggressive. And so I was thinking about a lot of those compounding factors and thinking about like how my son, as he ages, like how is him being both autistic and Black going to affect the way that he moves through the world. And so that definitely influenced my debut. But I think when I think about just like influences in writing in general, I do like to just pull from things that are real, and I like to pull from things that are happening around me and like extend those things in some way, right? How can I extend it out, right? I think just yesterday, I had a really, really interesting idea of like, I was like, people always kind of say that like autistic people are a little bit like oblivious. And I was like, wouldn't it be so fun to have like an autistic matchmaker, like someone who like can see like the connections between like other people, but cannot see when someone likes them? Like, wouldn't that just be so fun to write? And so like I think I just like to pull from real things and just like extend it. How can I extend this? How can I expand this into something else? How can I add details, fictionalize details to some kernel of truth?
That Matchmaker book sounds like a lot of fun, so would love to read that
You
someday.
know, might work on that.
If editors are watching. So, in All the Noise at Once, Aiden's narrative is peppered with notes on people, social observations, and the world around him, really centering his perspective and his autism with the reader. I'm curious how you went about forming his narrative and kind of adding those little introductions.
Yeah. And so it was funny because I wanted to find a way, I really wanted to find a way for people to tap into the way that, because like I'm autistic and I wanted to tap into kind of the way that my mind works without it being explicit or stereotypical or anything like that. And I think the notes came across because one of the things that I like to do is take note of things, right? It's always like, okay, I'm going to take note of that. Like I take like a mental note. And so I was like, well, I was like, well, since I'm on the page, I could literally use a mental note, right? Initially, I kind of wanted it to look like sticky notes, but that was a lot. But I wanted to find ways to really help physically visualize the way that it is that someone's mind might work when it's different than yours and the things that you're going back to and the things that you're referencing. Sometimes when people tell jokes, I have to go back to some reference that I've made previously to understand the joke. Or something like that. Because like sometimes I'll just like I'll miss things. I'll miss things and I'll miss like the understanding of things. And I have to I have to understand something that I've learned before to understand the thing that's happening now. Because maybe it was explained to me once before. So yeah, so I definitely think like the notes, I thought a lot about wanting people to be in the shoes of the mind of someone that doesn't think the way that maybe they think. And even if it is another autistic person, we don't all think the same way. And so I just thought that I just thought that it would be really, really effective to just find different conventions to do that.
No, I really loved it, and it was so seamless. I really did feel like I was in his shoes.
I love that. Thank you.
So I know the original idea for All the Noise at Once hit you in 2016, which is wild to think it's been a decade.
Oh, don't say that. That makes me feel old.
Could you tell us about your professional writing journey? So from getting agented and submission and all of that with this project.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I think even though the idea hit me in 2016, I mean, if you would have asked me in 2016 if I'd be here right now, I'd laugh at you because I knew nothing about querying. I knew nothing about finding an agent. I knew nothing about how to put a book out into the world in 2016. I just knew that I had this idea and I think I sat on it really. I just kind of sat on it and played with it mentally until I don't think I really started working on this in earnest until I wrote a short story version of it in 2019 that got me into my MFA program. And then when I was in my MFA program, I tinkered with this so much. I think I turned it into a screenplay. I turned it into a screenplay and then I added different elements to it. Like the football element came in a lot later. And originally my main character was Brandon, and that was just never working. And I couldn't figure out why the story wasn't working. And so a lot of things had to change over time until I really got it in a position that felt like it made sense to me. And even then, the story is wildly different now than it was when I submitted it to agents. But I will say, in terms of me querying, I think I had a comparatively easy journey, and I will never take that for granted. Because to me, even though it felt like a long time to me, like I acknowledge that there are so many people that have been on querying journeys for much longer than I was. And so for me, I had started querying, I think midsummer, like midsummer of 2022 in the middle of the summer sometime. So probably around June or so, June or July, one of those. And I got my first offer in August, and then I didn't sign with anyone until September. But but again, I also kind of went into it knowing very little. I think I like looked at like Jane Friedman and figured out how to write like a query letter. It probably wasn't even the best query letter. And I also wasn't smart enough to like do what other people do, like query in batches. I like sent all them suckers out at like the same time. I sent like 70 queries out at like all at the same time. Don't do that. Don't do that. But I definitely sent out a ton of queries like all at the same time. Um And yeah, and I got a notification in August, like mid-August or so. So it was really only a few months of querying. And that was an interesting call. And then once I started sending out you know, notices of an offer, I ended up with four offers, which was really surprising and exciting for me. And I think I signed with the third person that offered. But my query, I mean, my journey since then has been crazy because like I'm on my third agent now. So like I'm on my third agent now. And so, there's no one way to do things. But I think I almost quit though. Like I almost quit right before I got an offer because I got like this I mean like the most devastating rejection. And so like let this be a lesson to anyone else that like even if you get that really devastating rejection that like breaks you, don't quit because the good thing might be right around the corner. Because I got the most devastating rejection that was just like, I love the premise, but like the prose wasn't where I needed it to be, which is like the nicest way in the world to say that my writing was bad. And I was just like, I was just like, great, I suck at this. This is terrible. I should pull all my queries and give up and go hide in a hole. I was like so ready to quit. And I literally think like a few days later I got my offer. So that is just that's my lesson of the day, right? Like don't quit just because you get a really bad rejection because things really are subjective. But in terms of just my journey, yeah, I queried and then I think I revised it with my agent one time where my agent was just like, hey, this thing that happens on page like 50, this really big plot point. What if we change this really big plot point? So I revised like I revised like three-quarters of the book because everything changed, everything hinged on that one thing. So I changed like three-quarters of the book. It lost like 20,000 words. We went out on sub. Yep, it went from like 80,000 to like 66,000. I lost like 20,000 words in the process. It went out on sub and we got an offer within a few weeks. And so I feel so lucky. I feel so lucky with the way that things went for my debut experience. And I mean, I guess I also feel so lucky for the way that things have gone since then because it's won awards and it's been really critically acclaimed and that's been so exciting. So yeah, that was I hate it because it sounds so boring. It sounds so boring because it sounds like I had such an easy time. So
I mean,
but like
rewriting that much of your book does not sound like an easy time.
no, really, I did. I rewrote it, and that's like the one thing that I tell people is that like realistically, this thing has been rewritten so much times because it's existed as like a short story, a screenplay. Like I've rewritten this thing so many times, and then even then, right? Like it's like I said, we went on submission. It was 66,000 words, but when it went to print, it was like 90,000. So somewhere, so somewhere in the revision process with my editor, I got all those words that I lost back. So.
To segue a bit, because I imagine a lot of our audience are people who might be dabbling in short stories or writing in other forms and trying to write their first novel. Do you have any tips, since it sounds like you started with a short story and then transitioned, or things you may have learned from that process of kind of converting the project?
Yeah, I think for me too, I think one thing that I tell people is so, so, so useful is if you can do any screenplay study, and convert something into a screenplay and then convert it back, I think it's actually so helpful. Only because, and I know that you kind of asked about short stories, but for me, I think one of the most useful things, I think short stories are really, really great for like that snapshot in time. And I think that a short story is a really, really great place to find like grounding in character. I like to write like little short stories that are almost like vignettes of my characters doing other things outside of the story so that I can understand them better. Because a short story really is just it's a snapshot in time, right? It's this little contained moment, right, that has its own growth. And so I like to read a lot of short stories. I teach creative writing, so I read a lot of short stories and I teach a lot of short stories that I think are really, really great for that. But I think screenplay, I really genuinely think my biggest advice to anyone is to, if you can do any studies in screenplay and you can turn something into a screenplay and turn it back, I think it's so useful because screenplays are the epitome of show don't tell because you cannot have any of the interiority. And so all you can include is like potentially some movement blocking, right? What things look like, right? If you need to set a scene and like, oh, hey, it's panning over and this is what this looks like, or this person moves here, or this person moves there. Like you can do what it would visually look like and what people are saying, and that's it. You can't have what anybody's thinking, so you have to find a way to show what are they thinking, right? If they're going through something, if they're feeling a way, you have to show it in the action that the actor would actually take to show that thing rather than what they're thinking. And I genuinely think that that makes things stronger, like 100%, because it is the epitome of show don't tell. You cannot have any, you can't make it way too interior. And I think that it makes it stronger. So for me, I think I would recommend doing some studies in screenplay if you can get some screenplay books, see if you can see if you can translate that, because then I think when you bring it back to your book, you can add in that interiority later, but you'll find that you've had so much showing on the page and so much action that it makes your writing much better paced.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I think I studied one screenplay in a class and they tell you not to do the director's job. Like you're really not supposed to say and tell anything. And so that's a really
Mhm.
good point of that forces writers to really work on showing and not telling. So your new novel, The Lovers, the Liars, and Me, is a coming of age story that follows Julia, who journeys to Jamaica to find answers regarding her estranged mother. Both of your books beautifully highlight the conflict between teen personhood, the desires for truth and justice, and reckoning with the complexities of family and the world they thought they knew. Why do you write about and for teens? And what is most important for you when you are writing for young people?
Oh goodness. So why do I write about and for teens? So I think because like for me, like young adult was like such a saving grace for me, both when I was a teenager and like in actual like young adulthood, like 18, 19. Like I feel like those books were such a safe haven for me. So many authors wrote books that I think helped me come of age and helped me find myself. I still remember when my mom handed me the book, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Um, and I still to this day like if I have to like be like this, I'm like, we must increase our bus. And I can't not do it, right? And they were just so formative for me. I think books were such a formative place for me and they were such a transformative place for me. And I think I wanted to give that to someone else, right? To have those safe spaces, but to also have them potentially for those identities that I didn't necessarily get to see when I was a kid, you know? And I think it's so important for kids to have mirrors, and I also think it's important for other kids to have windows. And so I just hope to create those things because I think that kids need those books and I think they need those safe havens. And so it's so important for me to do that. And so what was the second part of your question? Because I feel like I lost it, my
It was
brain.
just why do you write for and about teens and what's important when you write for young people?
I think what's most important is capturing the things that I think that they might be concerned about or capturing the things that might impact them even if they don't realize it. And so I really do like to think about like what are problems that teens are facing, like genuinely. And so and I think sometimes those things might seem bigger than what people think they are, but like teens go through a lot. Like it's a hard time, right? To be going through like puberty and dealing with things, but there are so many things that we're dealing with as adults that sometimes kids are dealing with too. And it's interesting to think, right? Because you would think like, okay, well, they're kids. Do they really have to deal with the police? Yes. Like my first interaction with the police happened when I was a kid. My brother's first interaction with the police happened when he was a kid. My husband's first interaction with the police happened when he was a kid. And so, and so you have to think, right? If I am stressed out dealing with that as an adult, how does a kid deal with that? And how can I put that on the page to help them work through that, right? Or an estranged parent, right? Or losing a parent or any of those things. Like everyone doesn't go through hardships only when they're adults, right? Like you deal with that as a kid too. And how can I think about those things and put those things on the page to give kids the space to explore and see themselves and see the fact that those struggles do exist on the page so that it's not weird. Because I think like when you see that it's like in a book or even on TV or something like that, it makes you feel a little less alone because it makes you feel like, okay, someone is talking about these things. So it's not only me that's dealing with these things. And I think that's the beautiful thing about books is that they made me feel less alone. If I saw something that I was struggling with in a book, it made me feel like, oh, well, this is something that exists, like someone else knows about this thing. They're writing about this thing. And so this isn't just something that I'm dealing with. This is something that someone else is dealing with enough that they put it in a book, right? And so I hope to do that. I hope to give them those things so that they don't feel so alone.
Yeah, I love your comment about windows and doors and windows, what was it?
And
Windows,
mirrors.
windows and mirrors. Your point out windows and mirrors is really beautiful, and I think you captured fiction and why in particular. So for not a hot take, but if you had a magic wand to change anything about young adult fiction right now, what do you think it would be?
Oh, everything. No, I say everything. I wish that it was a little bit more appreciated. And I think that it was I wish that it was more appreciated. I wish that it was more pushed and it was seen as more important, especially because like we are in a literacy crisis. We are in a literacy crisis. And I think attacking books is not gonna help us out of a literacy crisis. But also I think, especially for young adult contemporary. Specifically, I just wish that it was pushed more, and popularized more. I think young adult contemporary had a really big heyday in like the 2010s to like 2015s, even maybe even before that, right? Like late 2000s to like around 2015 or so. And I think that that was a good time. I think that there was like balance then, right? Where like different genres were popular all at the same time. And I think young adult contemporary had a really, really big heyday. And I think that those books are just as important as like say fantasy or sci-fi and things like that. Because again, I think that it's so important for kids to see themselves as they are on the page. Of course, like you want escapism, and that's fine. And that's wonderful because I love fantasy. I have a ton of fantasy behind me right now. Um, I love fantasy, and that was one of my favorite things to read. But I also read so much contemporary too. I read so much contemporary, and I adored contemporary. And I felt like being able to see kids as they are and see kids that were like me or even unlike me, just living their lives and dealing with problems that either maybe I had dealt with or I hadn't dealt with yet, but I might have to deal with. And oh, how did they deal with it? I think that that's helpful too. And so I guess I just kind of wish that young adult contemporary was pushed and supported a little bit more by the overall industry.
So to switch gears a little bit into maybe more writing process and craft, what process of the writing journey is most difficult for you with a project, and what strategies have helped you kind of deal with those difficulties?
Mm. Probably outlining. I'm really, really bad at like God forbid someone asked me to write a synopsis. Why would you do that to me? Like what do you mean I need to figure out everything before I start writing? Oh my goodness, please don't do that. I'm really, really bad at that. I'm learning to be better at it because I have to be. That's the one thing I will tell anyone who is trying to be involved with writing is that like if you are a pantser, once you sign a contract, you are no longer allowed to be a pantser because the amount of times where like if you because for me I've done two book deals and the fun thing about that is that like they're like, hey, for that second book, can you give us an outline or a synopsis? And I'm like, great. Now I have to figure this out. Allow yourself the space to kind of go off the rails of that. I know I do. Like I try to really use that as like a rough guideline. And I hate to say like terrible to admit, worst thing in the world to admit that somehow writing outlines has actually helped me. Goodness. Hate to admit that they're right and outlines are helpful. But yeah, that's probably the hardest thing for me is just like writing an outline and like sticking to an outline because I think I'm such a discovery writer. And I think like the more that I get into a book and the more that I learn my characters, because I like to learn my characters ahead of time, but then once I start writing in their voice and in their head, I find that they kind of take over and sometimes they want to do their own thing. And so I find that I'm such a discovery writer that for me, like a synopsis or an outline makes me feel so like locked in and I'm like, oh my God, I can't, deviate. But you can deviate, but you do have to learn how to some extent, outline and or synopsis. Terrible, I know.
Yeah, definitely not something anybody really tells you before you get into this journey.
Eric Smith tells us.
So, for early career writers who are about to embark on this journey, what advice do you wish someone had given you when you had started?
I would say to be prepared for rejection, but don't let it break you. And I know I kind of said that earlier, but I do want to stand by that, right? Like be prepared that people are not everyone's not gonna like what you're doing, and everyone's not gonna understand what you're doing. But that doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't worthwhile. Um, because again, it's like I said, if I had adhered to every rejection, I would not be sitting here as an award-winning author, right? So like obviously it resonated with enough people and it resonated with the right people that I could sit here and say that I've won awards and good things have happened. Um Even though there were people who said no and even though there were people who didn't quite understand the vision, like someone will. And so I think prepare yourself for the fact that people are going to say no, but know that those no's are not the end and don't let it be the end. Don't let things like that break you. Um yeah, I think that that would be my advice. You gotta have like gotta develop some thick skin and really put on those perseverance pants.
Yes, persevere pants are a must. So, to kind of deviate to positive, what has been the best part of your writing career so far?
Oh, okay. So I think two things, and they're two slightly different things. And so like obviously I'm not gonna sit here and act like the first thing is like I've won awards, which is like so freaking cool. It's so freaking cool, and it's allowed me to go to so many places. I think like going to conferences, especially like going to NCTE, going to TLA, going to places like that. Like oh, that's just so fun. Like meeting educators, meeting librarians, meeting people in general, like because I also went to Winter Institute, meeting booksellers, like meeting people who are so passionate about books and meeting people who are excited about your book and meeting people that care so much. Like it is the best. Or even like kid facing events. I went to CLE Reads and oh my gosh, meeting the kids and then wanting to come sign your book and like they ran out of your book. Can you sign this other thing for me? And they're just I think I like came with like one extra copy of my book at CLE Reads and a kid said that they ran out and he couldn't get one and I just gave him my copy. I'm like, you can have this one because I'm just I was just take it. It's fine. Just take it. I love meeting the people who are so passionate about the books and that's definitely one of the things, but I also think like being able to like have won awards and be recognized in that way, it also enhances those opportunities to be able to do that. And I think that I'm so grateful and I'm so humbled and I never have the words because I think I'm also that person. I'm not like the most confident person in the world all the time. And so it's really funny because like so like when I get like a notification that I've been nominated for something, I'm like, "Oh my God, really?" And then I'm like in my head I'm like, "Okay, I'm not gonna win." And then if I win, I'm like, "Oh my goodness." I'm like, "Who told you guys to do that?" So I think it's been very, very exciting. But I think the other really, really great thing about the career path is just the community that I've been able to build over time. I think, getting to know other writers and like building community around myself and I think that that's really one of the best things to come out of it, like people that you can turn to and people that understand and people that are like kind of going through the same things with you, going through the writing process with you and going through the publishing process with you and people that you can kind of turn to. I also think that that's one of the most beautiful things to come out of it is just the community that I've been able to build.
Yeah, we've been in similar writing discords, and it's been so amazing to see your successes. And I remember kind of sub posts and all of that. And so, community is huge, I think, to
Yeah.
making this like sustainable.
It makes it survivable.
Yes, definitely. You cannot do this alone. So, what do you enjoy writing the most? And if you do you have any long-term visions for projects you'd like to tackle eventually?
Yeah. Oh, what do I enjoy writing the most? I feel like, okay, I love it's funny, I didn't think I was gonna like love I never saw myself as a YA contemporary writer. When I first decided I wanted to go into writing, I thought that I was gonna be like a YA fantasy writer. Look at that, you know. But I love YA contemporary. I love what, even like when I was first publishing, I was like, I'm not gonna stay in contemporary. And like somehow I just keep coming up with ideas and I love them and I'm having a blast. I love YA contemporary. I do love fantasy though. I love fantasy, but I also find that um I am somehow I somehow have come to love adult horror and working on adult horror as well. And so I have some really I think my mind is messed up. I have some messed up ideas. And so some of the things that I think I am hoping to branch out though is into the adult scene and into like the kind of horror fantasy sort of space is what I'm hoping for in the future and definitely things that I am, working on in secret.
Are there any current projects you're able to talk about or give us a sneak peek at all?
I mean, I think I can say I am working on a vampire project currently. I'm currently working on a vampire project. And that is all I think I can say. But outside of my vampire project, I am also working on another YA contemporary. That is, I'm just gonna leave it there because that I definitely can't talk about.
Very excited. So, speaking of books, what are your favorite tropes to read and write?
Ah, enemies to lovers. Oh, enemies to lovers is my favorite things to read. And oh, I think I definitely need to write it too. I love a good enemies to love. I love a good like give, like, oh, there's just something about it. There's like the tension, there's the I hate you, and now I don't hate you. I think that's why I love K-dramas. I literally think that this is why I love K-dramas because there's so much like enemies to lovers in K-dramas. I literally just finished one the other day called like Sold Out on You that was very much like they were so mad at each other at the beginning. It was so cute too. They were so mad at each other at the beginning. It reminded me a lot about Hometown Cha Cha Ta, which is like very, very similar. Like they're kind of like at each other all the time and then they fall in love. I don't know what it is about that that I adore, but I'm here for it. And now I'm watching another K-drama it's called My Royal Nemesis that does the same thing. They're just so at each other. And then I'm just like, just kiss already. And so I think that's like enemies to lovers is like hands down, it will always be my favorite trope. But I also love like a good like friends to lovers too. I think a good friends to lovers is always so cute. And I think I personally write friends to lovers. Like I love to read enemies to lovers, but I think like when I'm writing, I tend to write a lot of like friends to lovers. I just think it's so cute.
So, to switch it back to writing a little bit, I know you mentioned you teach, and so I'm wondering what you find helpful for teaching students about writing. What advice do you think resonates and helps them the most?
Ah, that's so interesting. And so I'm so strange. I'm very, very strange in that I don't use any craft books when I teach. Don't tell my administration. I'm just kidding, they know. But I don't use any craft books when I teach. And it's funny, I just finished so like I teach like a mix of different creative writing classes and so in any given time I might be teaching intro, advanced and then maybe like a specialized course and so like last semester I did like intro, advanced and a fantasy course for my seniors. My seniors were in a fantasy course. I teach at the college level. But it was really, really interesting because like I don't use craft books usually. I think for my fantasy course, I did use a book. I made them get like the Wonder Book, which is not really a craft book. I don't even know how to explain what the Wonder Book is. It is just really, really interesting. Everyone should get it. It's so cool. It's just the coolest book ever. By Jeff Vandermeer. But I typically don't use any craft books because I tell my students that like we learn by like studying stories. And so I give them a bunch of short stories. Or even like for my fantasy students, we did short stories, but then we also did first chapters. And so like I brought them a bunch of really good first chapters, like a bunch of really, really good fantasy first chapters. Um, and I think that I do think that one of the things that I tell them to pay attention to inciting incidents and plot points and consequences. Like that's always like the thing that I'm thinking about is how does one thing lead to another in a way that makes sense, but also, how can you have like a reversal? And so those are always those things that are really important to me when I'm telling my students how to write is I try to like break it down and I tell them I'm like almost any book can just be broken down into plot points. How many plot points that is might vary, but even if you can find three as like hinges, it's like things to hinge on. I always tell them I'm like try to find an inciting incident and then what is the consequence of that inciting incident and how does that lead to the first plot point? And then when that first plot point, what's the consequence of that plot point and how does that lead to the second plot point? That second plot point, what's the consequence of that? How does that lead to the third plot point? What's the consequence of that? Where can we find a reversal? And then how can we resolve everything? And so I try to like look at it within like this structure um that I think is like it's a little bit more loose than something like a Save the Cat that's like from this point to this point it's supposed to be this and from this point to this point like from these pages to these pages and for this much of the story I tell them it's a little bit more loosey goosey, right? There may be a lot of space between plot point one and plot point two. There may be a little bit of space between plot point one and plot point two, and much more space between plot point two and plot point three. So it's like I try to give them a little bit of room, right? But to just find those things so that you can have like guiding points, if that makes sense. And it's like I said, to think about those consequences. And I think having a reversal is so important. I love a reversal, that thing that you didn't necessarily expect to happen. But if I look at all the things that came before it, I understand how we get there, but I didn't expect it to happen. Like that's how I explain to them a reversal, right? I understood how we got there, just didn't necessarily expect that that was the thing that was going to happen. And so I like to have those things, and that's typically how I like to teach writing, especially with short stories or even within a novel. I always tell them that you can just expand that out in novel form. And I kind of stole a lot of that from screenplay. Stole a lot of that from screenplay. But I also think that again, I love a good screenplay structure. And maybe that's just like my preferred method of writing. But I tend to just teach my students by, I think, reading. I think the more that you read things, the better that you're gonna be at it. If you want to write fantasy, you should be reading a lot of fantasy. If you want to write, adult fantasy, read a bunch of adult fantasy. If you want to write YA fantasy, read a bunch of YA fantasy. If you want to write contemporary, I do think you always need to be reading within that genre and learning the conventions, because the truth is, I do think that you learn not necessarily by osmosis or anything, but by studying the thing. The more that you read it, I think that you inherently learn the shape of a story by reading so many stories. Like it starts to become second nature to you because your brain will have absorbed so many story structures.
That is a really good point, and I love the structure you discussed because it feels less rigid than I think some other plotting conventions. So I think that is a really logical way of thinking through a story. And your point about reading a lot is definitely super important. I'm wondering for you how you balance reading, writing, and your day job, which is also kind of writing adjacent. Do you have any trouble juggling that? I asked for myself.
Oh, sometimes I think, and it's so funny because I think my life is pretty busy. I have 5 kids and I'm married and and yeah, I do work, but I think I'm like one of those people that I like to just try to fit things in wherever I can. And so like if I'm, sitting on a car ride and I'm not the person that's driving, like that's a good time for me to read something. Or even if I am the person that's driving, that's a good time for me to put on an audiobook. Or if I'm folding laundry, let me listen to an audiobook while I'm folding laundry. If I'm washing dishes, let me listen to an audiobook. So like I like to use audiobooks if my hands are busy. Like if my hands are busy, that's such a good time to put on an audiobook. Like hands are busy, but like nothing is stopping me from tapping into, an audiobook. I will put on an audiobook. I 100% recommend that. That's such a good way to do things. But even like if it's, a few minutes before bed, a few minutes like when I wake up, if I have some time to squeeze something in, I think it's always good, because I think the thing is like all of that adds up, right? Like you may think to yourself, like, oh, well, if I'm only reading for 15 minutes, that's not worth it. But if you read for 15 minutes and you're able to get a chapter done a day, you'll finish a book. And you'll finish a book eventually. Or even if you're like, oh, well, I'm only in the car for 20 minutes. Okay, but that's 20 minutes of an audiobook. That might be two chapters. That might be two chapters done on the way there and on the way back, you know? And so I think fitting it in the places that you least expect it is so helpful. But I do think that audiobooks have helped me get a lot done too.
Are there any books you're currently reading or books you've really enjoyed in the past year or so that you recommend to
Yeah,
our
oh
audience?
goodness, in the past year or so.
Or it can
I feel
be
like
longer than that.
no, I know. I feel like I talk about Camilla all the time, but like Arcane Inheritance by Camilla Cole is just amazing. I was just rereading Immortal Dark to read Eternal Ruin. And so like I just read Eternal Ruin and those books are so good and obviously like just good to enjoy, but also like I said, I was working on a vampire book myself and I just love reading a good vampire book when I'm working on something. They're not the same at all, but still good to read. An Ocean Apart by Jill 2 was really, really good. When Devils Sing, oh my God, by Zancor. Oh my God, that book was so good. That book was so, so good. I just think I'm trying to think though, because there's so many. I feel like I could name even your book. Like I I genuinely think like I'm just like there are just so many all the books behind me. There you go. All the books behind me. Every book that's currently behind me. No, oh my goodness. Kelly Andrew, The Gravewood. I just read The Gravewood. Oh my God. So good. And for audiobooks, I was just recently I missed the whole like Holly Black Fae wave. And so I got into like Cruel Prince and like Queen of Nothing and things like that, like just late, just late. Did not know anything about it, missed that whole wave. So I'd been reading those and I just finished The Wicked King on audiobook. And again, I just love me some enemies to lovers. So you know what? I'm sad that I missed out on that at the time, but you know what? I'm getting it now. And I'm here for it now.
I know you play a lot of video games. Do you ever study video games, or is there ever anything you learn about story when you're playing them, or that kind of an
Oh,
independent hobby?
yes, I love video games for studying things. I love video games for studying things, especially when I think especially when I think about the way that I think about writing with consequence. That is what I love video games for because I love playing games that have consequences. And I love playing games that like the choices that you make have such a huge impact on the way that things turn out. And I think that it makes me think about like what are the consequences of various decisions of my characters and how might this play out differently if my character did this instead of this thing. But I think that video games are such a good way for me to kind of like reset and think about other worlds, especially like speculative worlds and how things might play out, and how I can expand worlds, especially make worlds more vivid. Um, I feel like yes, 100%. I think that games, because I like to play RPGs, and so I'm not necessarily the type of person to just kind of jump in and jump out of like a multiplayer. Sometimes I might, but it's very, very rare. And I might like play a cozy game here or there too. But I think for the most part, I love to play like a big sweeping RPG, like the Mass Effect series and the Witcher series and the Elder Scrolls series. Like give me a big sweeping world. Give me something that I can get lost in, the Persona series. And I love especially series like Persona because it's so fun to see that juxtaposition between like real life and something speculative happening. Um, which is so fun. And like for context for anyone who doesn't know what Persona is, it's typically like there's always like this other world where they're kind of like fighting demons at night. Um and like in the daytime you can just like live your life and go to school and make friendships and things like that and that can help you when you're fighting like your nighttime demons. Um, and I just love that too. Like I love that for like that juxtaposition of like it's a little bit more like magical realism, right? And like how do you slip into this other world and so I think it's really really cool to see how different video games will tackle certain things, especially when it comes to speculative writing. And horror video games are amazing and so good for like how to really like scare the crap out of but also good for consequences because so many horror games now are like consequence based, like those Dark Pictures anthology games. They just came out with a new one that's like set in space, and like I played like the demo and it scared the crap out of me. And my husband played the demo and he did his worst. Like my mine was better. I tend to get better endings than him. Um but I love like games like that, like those horror games and like they're consequence based. And I think like I just learn a lot. I think in the speculative side of things, I think I learn a lot from video games.
So to bring it back to yourself with a fun question, speaking of RPGs, you contributed to This Is How We Roll, a tabletop RPG anthology. If real life were to transform into an RPG, what class do you think you would be?
Oh, I'm always a sorcerer. Actually, no. Yes, I'm always a sorcerer. Because I was gonna say maybe not, because I've been doing druid lately. And it's been very, very cool. I don't know. Maybe because like the shape shifting has been really, really cool. Not gonna lie. I think for the first time, because I'm always a sorc. Like I'm always a hardcore sorc. No matter what I play, I'm always a sorc. I'm always a sorcerer. That's always like been my go-to. But lately, Druid has been calling my name. I don't know. So maybe I need to like revise every previous answer where I've said sorcerer because I think the really, really cool thing about a druid is like they're so attuned to the earth, but also it's so healing. Every single time you shapeshift, you get to like heal, like your health, like it has its own health bar, right? So like I could be like dying and I transform into like a bear and I have like a whole new health bar, right? Because I've tapped into nature. I've tapped into nature. I have a whole new health bar. Now I'm this big vicious thing, right? Or if I need to, it's like there's so much utilization to it, right? There's been times when I'm like, oh, I need to get to this small space. I can transform into a mouse really, really quickly and like get into this space and come back. And like I actually think it's maybe a little bit more useful than a sorcerer. It's kind of like the Swiss Army knives of magical classes. So maybe I revise every previous answer and now I'm gonna say I'd be a druid.
We're both very similar. I don't do tabletop, I do video games, and I'm usually sorcerer or druid. So,
We're right here. You understand.
so what do you want folks to take away from your books?
Oh, that's such a broad question. Um, I feel like one of the things like it's so funny because I think I was talking the other day and we were talking about like what's your brand, right? Like what's your brand? Like if you had to describe your brand in one sentence, what's your brand? And I think so far it's been like messy teens and messy situations. And I think that's a fun way to describe my brand, right? Messy teens and messy situations. They're getting themselves into things or trying to get themselves out of things and sometimes those things are big and sometimes those things are small. But I think the one thing that I hope that kids and or anyone can take away is that no matter how messy the situation or no matter how bad you messed up, that you can come back from it. Um, and I don't think that you should consider yourself a lost cause, right? Like you are bigger than your worst mistake. Because I think that so many times, like, we can achieve a lot of things, but I think that we tend to identify more with the ways that we mess up. And we beat ourselves up so badly when we mess up, and we let that become a part of ourselves and we let those be those identifiers, right? We let the negative things be the identifiers instead of the positive things. And we truly tell ourselves that there's just no way to come back from any of the negative things that we've done. But I think that you need to give yourself chances. And I think that you need to give yourself space to come back from those things. And don't give up on yourself because I think that that's how you end up in that hole of just, well, I'm already bad, let me just be worse, right? And don't think like that. I would hope that everyone can come away from it knowing that like no matter how badly they messed up, they can always come back from it.
So, Right Hive's tagline is writing the future we need. What does that look like to you?
I think for me, that's writing the things that I hope to see in the world, right? Like whether that is, a football team being accepting of an autistic player, whether that is someone, finding the space to cope with an estranged parent. I always hope to write the sort of empathy that I want in the world into my books. And so I think for me right now, that's really what I'm working on. I'm working on writing the sort of empathy that I hope that can exist into the world and make the world a better place. Because I think that the only way that we can exist in the future is to be a little bit more empathetic.
So we're at the end of our time today, but that was such a lovely conversation. I wanted to give you a chance to kind of talk about your newest release and tell people where to find the book, as well as any last words you have for our audience.
Yes, and so my newest release is The Lovers, the Liars, and Me. And as I think we talked about already, it follows a teen girl who is trying to reconnect with her estranged mother, but she finds a lot more in the process, including about herself and her sexuality, and even a few family secrets along the way. Um, it is wherever books are sold. I'm 99% sure. And so wherever you can snag one. However, if you pre-order one from Bookmarks in North Carolina and you can get that, sent to you and everything, you will have it signed and personalized and you'll get some pretty stickers, some pretty tarot card themed stickers with them. And so that's always fun. We like stickers. I like stickers. You should also like stickers. But you might get some pretty stickers with that. So if you pre-order from Bookmarks, you can get it that way. What was the second part of that?
Just any final words of wisdom for our audience.
Oh, I feel like I've said so many words of wisdom. I've yapped at you already. Just remember everything that I have said, and hopefully it will help you through something eventually.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you all in the audience for joining us for this incredible conversation. I hope you are enjoying the amazing events as part of the Right Have Conference and have a great rest of your day.